Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
When tragedy becomes a reality. We are joined here by author Stephen W. Wilson today, live from Scottsdale, Arizona. He's going to talk more about his life and what forever changed him and his work. And we are excited to have you here. And thank you for joining us. Please
Thank
give
you,
us
Jill.
a round of applause. Thank you so much. Steve, first and foremost, let me just get everyone your website. Author Steve wwilson.com is the website.
Yes.
We're going to talk today to start about you, obviously, in your background and basically what changed your life. What happened to you? Would you mind sharing the story with everyone today?
Sure. I was just a normal kid when I was up till 9 years old. Had a lot of friends, doing well in school. Everything was fine. And then one Saturday, we went to the movies to see a double feature, which they had in those days. And when the first feature ended, the curtain would close and you'd run up to the concession stand. So when the first movie was over, I went up to the concession stand, bought some popcorn, and then went over to the Coke machine. Before I could put my money in, a guy put a dime in and bought me the Coke. I thanked him, and then he says, I need a little help down here. Could you come with me? Well, being a naive kid, and I said, sure. And he walked me down the hall and turned into the restroom and sexually assaulted me. That changed my life forever. When it was over, I didn't know what to think. I never knew anything like that could happen. And I kind of blamed myself, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why he picked me out, but he did. And back then, 1958, there wasn't a lot of mental health resources back then, and I didn't know anything about it anyway. So I decided not to tell anybody, and so I didn't for 30 years. And that changed my life forever.
Which a lot of people do. Well, I commend you on speaking out and the work you've done since. Let me ask you, you currently reside in Scottsdale. You were originally from, it was Ohio, correct?
Yes.
And could you share a little bit about your life? I mean, before that, then the after that incident.
Well, I was in third or fourth grade. I can't remember now. But about 2 months after the incident, I fell into my first depressive episode. I had no idea what it was. I felt lonely. I felt like I had no friends. I didn't have any feelings, and I didn't care for anybody. I didn't want to do anything. All I did was sit in front of the TV and do nothing. That lasted about 2 or 3 months. And then I got out of it, not knowing what it was or what was happening. I just went on with my life. And it came back in seventh grade and knocked me back down again. And then I got over it, not knowing at the time that I was bipolar, and that bipolar you don't stay depressed or manic all the time. It comes in waves. So I was just beginning to learn that. I went through high school and it came and it went. And then I went to college in Florida. And when I got out of college, I crashed and got real bad. And one night I got in a fight with my father. And the next thing I knew I was in a mental hospital. And I stayed there for 3 weeks. in 1972, when that was, they diagnosed me as clinically depressed. They had just a few medications back then, nothing like it is today. So I tried them all and none of them worked. They made me sick, whatever the results were. So nothing worked, and I continued being very bad, down all the time. This was not a time that was like others. I mean, I was down for 6 or 7 years. And then in 1978, my psychiatrist came in and said he thought he made a mistake and that I'm really bipolar. Well, hell, I didn't know what bipolar was. So he said it's a whole different range of medications that you take. And he put me on lithium, and right away I got about 50% better. So I could resume my life, not cured. There is no cure for bipolar. There is no cure for depression. But I was able to get back in the ballgame. During that 8 years, I lost all kind of jobs. I quit jobs. I was fired. I could not work for more than 6 months in one place because I just couldn't do it.
Now, did you have family around supporting you? Where did you live? How did you
I
take
had
care
no
of yourself?
support. I had family living with me, but remember, it's about 50 years ago, and my family didn't have a clue what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, remember, I started in 58. So in
Yeah.
about 71 or 72, my mother finally figured out, because of her past, that I was having problems. So she got me my first psychiatrist. But he's the one who diagnosed me as clinically depressed. So that he gave me very little help for those 8 years. And my family had no idea what to do. So that took its toll. And then I got lithium and I got better. And I kind of went, the biggest thing that happened to me after I got lithium and all those years was the ruminations, or my mind running crazy. I had suicidal ideation early in the 70s. When I got out of the hospital, they went away. But the ruminations just drove me crazy. So if I felt I said something wrong to somebody and hurt them, that just beat me up, go around and around in my mind. It just, if you've never taken a night, for the normal person who can't sleep because he's thinking about something at work.
Mm-hmm.
But when that gets solved,
Yeah.
it goes away. Well, in bipolar, even after it's solved, it can play on your mind all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that until 2000, when I had a new psychiatrist because mine had died, and he put me on Paxil to try to relieve the ruminations, and it worked. So since 2000, I've been pretty good.
Well, there's more to the story, obviously, and I would love to
Yeah.
hear more. And then all of a sudden, you decided to become an author. When did this all take place?
Well, about 4 years ago, I still had a couple things that were bothering me about my past, other traumas other than just the sexual
Sexual
assault.
assault.
So I went to a trauma therapist here in Scottsdale to try to put an end to it. What I hadn't gotten was closure for me to one of them. And when I didn't get closure, it would beat me up from time to time. So I go to this trauma therapist, and she said, well, we're going to start the earliest point of your life that you can remember and take you all the way through your life and see what's happened. And it took about 8 or 9 months, whatever. And we had a full layout of my whole life, and there was a lot in it. And she looked at it and said, you ought to write a book about this damn thing. You got so much in there that you don't realize goes on when you're mentally ill.
Yeah.
So that's why I started. And I'd been a sports writer for a newspaper, and I'd been sports information director for Ohio Wesleyan University. And so I had some writing experience. And so I just took on the project, and it went pretty well.
Tell us now about the book, the title of the book. I want to know how long it took to write, and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's called Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey.
Okay.
One of the things about writing this book was I didn't have to do any research on it. I did 3 drafts where the average number is 7. And because I knew exactly what I was going to put in it, I'd just gone through everything. So it still took about a year and a half to write it. The biggest problem is getting it published. And that took another year and a half, 2 years. And it is now published on Amazon and available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. The content of the book is my whole life. The section about when I was sexually assaulted, when I got in a fight with my dad, what it was like in the hospital, and what it was like when I got better. I started, well, let me tell you what happened. In about 1995, every Christmas in my clothing store, we would hire young ladies to wrap packages and run errands because we were too busy to do it. And this one Christmas, I hired this little girl. Her name was Angie, and she was very bubbly, very cute, very smart, one of the best students in her school. She was like 16, had everything going for her. And one Saturday morning, her best friend, who also worked for us running packages, came in. She was crying. I said, "What the hell happened?" Angie had shot herself in bed the night before. Just before that, a friend of mine from college called me. We'd been talking several times, and I knew his son was in distress, and the son got picked up for breaking into a house. He was about 16 also, and the police called him and the parents and told him to come down and get him. They get there. He gets out of the squad car, pulls out a gun, says, "Mom and Dad, I love you, but I can't take it anymore." Shoots himself in the head. So this really shook me up.
Oh my goodness.
And I began to go ahead.
No, I'm just in awe of the story.
Well, anyway, I decided, since I had gone through all that stuff and I had had suicidal ideations, I would start speaking to high school health and psychology classes, and I did. And at the end of every talk I gave, I would invite any students who wanted to come up and share their story with just me. So I can remember that one day this girl came up and she told me that she was a top student. She was a great athlete, had a lot of friends, had everything going for her. She was one of the top students in the school, and she was a senior and she was getting ready to go to college. She said, "Mr. Wilson, I can't stand it. I'm so depressed. My parents are just beating me up to get into the best college. They always say I have to get straight A's. They say I have to be the best athlete. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I told her the only thing I could tell her was there's help out there for her, and I gave her the name of a child psychologist. At another speech I gave, a girl came up and she was 16 or 17 in high school. And she said, I have no friends. Nobody likes me. My parents hate me. I have nowhere to go. I want to die or I want to run away. That kind of talk made me start looking into how bad mental illness is in the United States and around the world. I found that 20% of Americans have mental illness, and that holds for almost every country. Now, if you multiply that out, 20% of 330 million in the United States, well, that's got to be 60 million. So there's a lot of people out there who are suffering. When we moved to Scottsdale in 2008, I wanted to continue speaking to high school classes. I ran into a problem. They wouldn't let me because I was too old. And I said, Jesus, what makes a difference how old I am? But they said, nope, you can't be over 35. So I answered an ad in a local newspaper to become a facilitator for mental health support groups. I got hired. I now do 2 of them every week here in Phoenix. I have about 15 people in each session, and it is amazing what I found out. I've been doing it for 8 years. All ages come to my meetings. It is apparent to me, after having worked with over 1,000 people, that a lot of our problems with mental illness come from being sexually assaulted, or physically beaten, or mentally abused at a young age, and then it ruins the person's life and they go into deeper problems. They tell me their stories. Their stories are, many of them are more horrific than what I went through. And so I've been doing that, as I said, for 8 years. What I've also found out is that unless you make a very good living in the United States, it is very difficult to get quality therapy. It costs a damn much. I went to that trauma therapist. It was $200 a session. Well, I could afford it. But in my groups, 90% of them can't. So they have to be diagnosed and given a designation as for disability income. Then they can go to clinics. Well, the clinics are overwhelmed. There's so many people who need help. So when a guy goes to get his first session, and let's just say he's in distress, he's suicidal. He goes to that first session, and many times they say you can come back in a month. Well, what the hell happens to the poor guy for the next month? He's hurting. Or when he does come back, even if they give him a quicker appointment, he may find that his first therapist is not there anymore, so he's got to start all over again. So that's a real problem, and it's all throughout every state in this country. I've done about 25 podcasts, many of them in different countries in the US. And I'm finding that the problem is worldwide. A couple of reasons this is happening. The insurance companies, they don't want to pay for mental illness. So they don't supply the professionals with enough money to live on. So the professionals have to raise their prices, and then people can't afford them. And I can remember when I went to get my first insurance policy, life insurance, right up front it said, we don't cover any mental illness. Now that was back in the 70s, but that'll give you an indication about how long this has been going on, and no one seems prepared to try to change it. The other thing is there's such a stigma against people with mental illness, and you can tell by the media. Whenever there's a shooting, who do they blame it on? The mentally ill. And no one in government tries to do anything about it. It all continues going on the same way. So that's where I am, battling with that, trying to do podcasts, trying to get the word out. Hopefully somebody will pick up on it, and maybe we can start a national conversation about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, remind us of the name of the book, how we can find you.
Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. And it's available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Some other places I'm just not familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. Pleasure having you here. Is there also any other way we can reach you? Do you want to share any social media pages with our listeners?
I'm on Facebook.
Good.
I'm on Instagram. You can get my page by putting in Steve Wilson 4990. I'll give you my email address. It's swwilson.wilson@gmail.com.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here, and looking forward to the next time we get to connect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, please stay tuned. More of the show is on the way.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.